Lewis Hamilton and Felipe Massa had a legendary battle for the title back in 2008, and it seems like the Brazilian driver isn't ready to get over the fact that he lost the championship in the last turn of the last race of the season. There was one scandal that marked the 2008 season in which Hamilton was able to finish third, his ex-teammate Alonso was able to win the race, and Massa finished pointless on P13, one that's known as Crashgate and is still being discussed at this point. But Massa wants to do much more than just discuss it, as the former Ferrari driver will file a legal case in which he'll try to reclaim the 2008 title all to himself. Crashgate is by far one of the most embarrassing moments that's ever happened in the sport, and the fact that the aftermath was so severe goes to show that the sport wasn't willing to let something else slide like that in the future again. However, the fact that it happened to Massa and that it ruined his chances to win the championship is enough for us to talk about and discuss it in further matters, and as we mentioned earlier in the video, Massa isn't willing to let go of the outcome and wants to complete a legal action against the sport for not acting on time with Crashgate and nullify the results of it. Before we go any further with the video, let us tell you shortly about Crashgate, for those of you who still have no idea what it is and how it influenced the 2008 season. Crashgate was a planned action by Renault, a team that struggled to keep up with McLaren and Ferrari at that point, and a team that had Alonso starting at P15 during the Singapore GP and somehow managing to win the race. Not to take anything away from Alonso, but with the car that Renault presented in 2008, it was practically impossible for him to compete against the likes of Hamilton or Massa. Alonso's teammate Nelson Piquet Jr. has crashed into the circuit wall at turn 17, bunching the drivers behind him, so you'd think that there's nothing wrong with this, right? However, Alonso, Piquet's teammate at that time, had pitted for fresh tyres just 2 laps before Piquet brought out the safety car, meaning that most of the leading cars had to enter the pit stop and Alonso ended up in front of them. This resulted in Massa having a lot of pressure on his shoulders to complete a successful pit stop, as he was prematurely released with the fuel hose still attached to the car, which then went on to see the Brazilian driver being added a drive-through penalty for an unsafe release. This saw Alonso win the race, with Hamilton finishing third and Massa 13th. As Piquet was dropped by the team after the 2009 Hungarian GP, the Brazilian had nothing to lose and admitted publicly that the outcome of the Singapore GP was planned all along, which ended with Flavio Briatore, the team's managing director, and the executive director of engineering, Pat Simmons, leaving the team and being banned from it for a certain period of time. Now, if the results of the race were reverted, the 2008 championship would receive a brand new look. Just to be clear, we're not the ones that want this to happen. Hamilton has won the championship in a fair and square manner, if you ask us. And while we sympathise with Massa and the way he had to deal with the loss after winning the last race of the season in Brazil and finding out that Hamilton finished P5, enough to make him a champion, this is by no means how you should deal with a situation that happened almost 15 years ago. However, the Brazilian driver has opened up about his actions and why he plans to implement them the way he does. As he said, "I think if you've been punished for something that wasn't your fault and it's the product of a robbery, a stolen race, justice has to be served. In fact, the right situation is to cancel the result of that race. It's the only justice that can be done in a case like this. In the end, I was the one who lost the most with this result, so we are going after it to understand all this." Eccleston and Mosley were two of the main actors in this story, and what they had to say only goes to show that there's a lot to be pursued in this case. Although if you ask us, it would be truly discriminatory and derogatory towards Hamilton and his legacy to go after a championship that he didn't have a direct involvement in. Bernie Eccleston has spoken about this matter as well, as he made the shocking revelation that he and Max Mosley, who was the FIA's president back then, already knew that Piquet was ordered to crash at turn 17 to give Alonso early pit stop advantage, which resulted in a race lead and then a race win. Questions are now being asked about not only the race result, but the entire championship as well. When talking about it, Eccleston added, "We decided not to do anything for now. We wanted to protect protect the sport and save it from a huge scandal. That's why I used angelic tongues to persuade my former driver Nelson Piquet to keep calm for the time being. We had enough information in time to investigate the matter. According to the statutes, we should have cancelled the race in Singapore under these conditions. That means it would never have happened for the championship standings, and then Felipe Massa would have become world champion and not Lewis Hamilton. Now, while this is one of the wildest takes that has been laid out by Eccleston, if this happens, rest assured that the sport would see one of the biggest losses in popularity and reputation, so it's definitely not a good thing for the FIA to examine the situation that happened in Singapore in 2008 even further. And on top of that, there are a couple of arguments that support Hamilton's case that even if the FIA wanted to take a deep dive into this and investigate it to the bottom, it wouldn't turn out in the favour of the Brazilian driver. For starters, the FIA doesn't have enough evidence. And even though Mosley did tell about what Piquet had said to him in the room after being sacked by Renault 1 year later, the governing body steered clear of launching a formal investigation straight away. Despite Piquet Sr.'s word, the FIA could not launch charges because there was no concrete proof that Piquet had been told to crash deliberately. And after learning about what he did in 2008, Mosley explained that he recruited senior investigators to interview Piquet Jr. for a formal statement on what happened. And even with this in mind, he felt that he didn't have enough to compile a case against the Crashgate situation. "We had the statement, the signed statement from him," said Mosley. "But of course that wasn't enough because I knew that even if I produced this statement with the whole story and Nelson Jr. gave evidence, the defence would be, we just fired him. He's just being spiteful. He's just trying to cause trouble." Furthermore, the Spa interviews have a lot to account for in this case, as Mosley said that it was only after the FIA sent investigators and lawyers to the 2009 Belgian GP to interview representatives of the Renault team that the governing body had enough to work on. Even though the Spa interviews eventually convinced the FIA it had enough to take it to the FIA World Motorsport Council, they also offered some early insight into just how much Alonso knew. While it's definitely clear that the governing body wanted to have every piece of evidence possible before taking action, for Massa, the real question right now will be whether he believes the governing body could have acted much earlier than they did. Hamilton has also spoken about the words that have been said by Massa, as the seven-time world champion added, "I think all we can say is that it was a tough season. Things happened and there were lots of what-ifs throughout the season. We had quite a fair battle throughout and I've always found him to be a fair driver, so I'm a bit surprised and shocked to hear him say that, to be honest." The statement was made back in 2009, and now we're very eager to see how Hamilton will react when he finds out that his championship could be put in jeopardy. This is the only championship he was able to win with McLaren, after almost winning it in 2007, as he lost by 1 point to Raikkonen in Ferrari. With this in mind, what do you think about Massa's actions against the outcome of the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix? Do you think that the Brazilian driver is in the right to pursue a total change of the race outcome and claim his first and only championship in his career after 15 years have passed by? Let us know in the comments below.